So let me start off by saying one thing. And you guys, ladies, today is your day to correct me and tell me where I'm going wrong and what I don't understand and all that. Trust me, I need it. I've never been a woman or a girl. As much as I'd like to try to think of the way it must feel or the way it must be, I can't. I'm stuck within this body and this perception. But let's talk about something real quick, and I hope that I don't get in trouble with you guys today. But it is what it is. There is this thing going on in our world right now where you can change your sex. You can be gay. You can be trans. You can be a drag queen. You can do just about anything you want. I support all that. I think it's great. I think it's fine. I support uh, personal your own personal journey through life, and that includes gender and sex. Now, generally, when we talk about sex, we're talking about male and female. Those are body parts, right? Men are born with certain body parts and certain chemicals surging through their bodies. Women are born with different body parts and different chemicals. Now, women have testosterone, certainly, different levels. All different women have different levels of estrogen and testosterone. So do men. Men have different levels of estrogen and testosterone. One of the strangest things of all is that these big muscle dudes that take testosterone, they end up having a lot of estrogen in their systems because of this crazy thing that happens with the testosterone molecule. Somehow it binds to other molecules and becomes estrogen. So that's called gynecomastia, and that's why heavy testosterone users often grow breasts and things like that. And that's kind of an awkward thing to talk about, but it is something that happens. So there is no doubt that men and women come from the same mold, right? We have the same basic form, and we have the same, we're the same species and all that, and we do have the same chemicals, but they're just different levels, right? Right. So all that to say, it's dangerous to talk about people collectively. Whenever I say women or men, that's dangerous, because the first thing that we talk about is, hey, Shanafelt, when you say women, you're applying what you're saying to every single woman, and I'm not like that, right? And I get that. Yeah, it's true. You can't really prescribe one characteristic to any group of people, women, men, short people, tall people, whatever. But if you can't speak collectively, then we're in trouble. I think we're really in trouble. You have to be able to generalize sometimes, but otherwise you're lost in the nuance of the world. And if you get lost in the nuance of the world, you can't make sense out of it. So I want you to know, if I say women, I don't mean all women. I mean a plurality of women, or I mean the cliche of the plurality of women. Or think about this: if you go to the mall and you sit down in the food court at the mall and you watch 100 people walk by, if you can't judge man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, if you can't judge that, I would say 95 times out of 100, there's something wrong with you. I'm serious, because that's something that you need to be able to do for life, for our world, right? You just have to. But that doesn't mean that is in no kind of way saying that I don't think that androgynous people are interesting or cool or anything like that. Like I said, there may be 5 or 10 really, really interesting people in that mix. And those are the ones that make really life really interesting. And I totally support that. Some of my favorite things, drag queens, man. I don't know. I was down in Key West, and boy, I met a bunch of those guys, and they're funny, man. They're fun to be around. It's pretty hilarious. But but anyway, so what we're going to talk about today is heavily into that kind of stuff, right? And I started off by saying I feel like we're in marriage counseling, because we kind of are. All right, so let's talk about the girls in their summer dresses. And I want you today, of all times, I want you to definitely interrupt me and just tell me anything you want to say, okay? All opinions are valid. I'm not going to shoot you down. Um, and like I said, there's not a whole lot of hard science involved in this. It's just the way we live, because at long last we are social creatures, and we do get married, and we do join with usually another person that we really care for. And we have to be able to understand those people. Oftentimes it's person of another sex, and there lies the problem, right? Because how do you understand someone of another gender, of another sex, when you haven't been that? It's hard, right? Okay, so let's talk about this. It starts off like this. They are a young couple, and I think they're probably, how old do you guys think that they are? I don't think it says. I think he says I'm approaching middle class or middle age, right? So I would think that they're probably 30, 30, mid 30s maybe. And by the way, if you ask this one guy right here, that's the best time of your life is your 30s. It's the time when you get because your 20s, we've talked about this. They're tough. They're rough because you're doing all this that you're coming and listening to me. You're doing all this stuff and you're trying to work also. You're trying to find yourself, figure yourself out. And then your car dies and your boyfriend dumps you and all that stuff. But when you get to your 30s, you pretty much have it figured out. The world is not watching you anymore. Your parents have made their decisions about whether you're successful or not. You are pretty much not the entry level in your job anymore. You're pretty much kind of mid level. And the money starts to come in, and you have probably your house, and things start to get stable. And now it's time to enjoy life. And at your 30s, you are your most best person, I think. You're most creative, the healthiest, the most beautiful. So don't think that your 20s, after your 20s, you're just done. It's not true. It's not true. Okay, so here they are. They're probably in their early 30s and they're in Manhattan. You guys been to Manhattan? No? Yes? No? You should go. You should go. You can I know we got to get COVID over with and all that, but when that's done, you should go. It is an explosion of humanity, for lack of a better word, really. There is every type of person you can imagine there in Manhattan. And I went there. I've been there many times, but I went there one time for 5 days just before Hurricane Sandy. And I was like on the last. I don't know if I told you guys this or not. You're gonna hate me after this, but I have free airfare to anywhere in the world. On days like what? Because my best friend is a flight attendant and I'm his buddy, and so I can do it. And so the cruelty upon irony, I've only been his buddy for maybe 2 years now, and part of that time was COVID, and it's like, you know what I mean. So anyway, but I've been to I went to Manhattan just to study it because my second novel, Apotheosis, it starts in Manhattan. And I just sat there for about 3 days, just walking around Manhattan, taking notes and studying people. It was one of the most wonderful things I ever did. And there are so studying their mannerisms and studying the way they moved and talked and moved their eyes and what they were saying and what they were doing. And and it's not just women, believe me. There's tons of different types of people there. So I think you should go. It is an explosion of culture and humanity like none other. Manhattan is intense. I remember the first time I went. Now, I'm I'm from San Angelo, Texas, you guys. As much as I hate to admit that, I'm from the place where civilization visited last. I'm not sure it's there yet, but when I went to Manhattan the first time, it was like a dream. It was like you look around at the buildings and just the terracotta gargoyles and just the people and the pace of it all, and it just blows you away. It's mind-boggling. But here we are. We have an Ohio guy. He's from Ohio. I don't know much about Ohio, except for that it's not Manhattan, right? Here we have an Ohio guy who moves to Manhattan, and he's kind of like a kid in a candy store a little bit. But for him, it's the ladies that he's looking at. So it starts off like this. They're walking on 8th Street. Now, okay, so Manhattan is broken up like this. You have what is it? Oh, I'm going to mess it up a little bit. But anyway, it's a grid pattern. It's a grid pattern. Everywhere there is a grid pattern except Greenwich Village. And that's why Greenwich Village has windy streets. And that's why it's kind of high class and everything, because the grid pattern kind of sucks. One way is numbered streets, Fifth Avenue, Sixth Avenue, Seventh Avenue. And the other way are the named streets, Broadway. Okay. And it goes on like that. So they're on Fifth Avenue, where they start on 8th Street. And what does he do? He's with his wife. They've been married 5 years, which I kind of laugh at, but they've been married 5 years. And he's like, a good looking woman walks by and he's like, he's checking her out, right? I mean, you get the impression that he's really checking these girls out, not like a rational human being would, just kind of looking, oh yeah, just kind of nonchalantly, but like, hey, babe, what's up? Like really breaking his neck, like. And that's my first thing that I want to say is the dude's being a jerk. I mean, he's just that's just not a nice thing to do, right? It's just not a nice thing to do. And so I think one of the things you can take away from this is dialogue. There's so much in the dialogue with this, I think. Remember, you're going to write your essay about something. So for this one, I think you can take away the dialogue because you can really, really, really see the difference. Now, I have to be careful because I'm not trying to say that all men and women speak like this, but at least this one author believes that a plurality of men and women speak in this manner, And then it's for you as the writer of the one analyzing the essay and writing your essay, analyzing the story and writing your essay, it's for you to determine, hey, but he thinks that men and women speak this way and feel this way and think this way, but not so. And then you write your rebuttal. You don't have to agree. In fact, the best essays they disagree, And also think of that also when you get your outside sources for your last essay. You don't have to find sources that agree with the case you're making. In fact, it's even more interesting when you find sources that you disagree with, and then you provide a rebuttal against them. That's a much higher level of intelligence too, believe it or not. And then just finding someone who agrees with you and say, yep, here, this guy said it too. This woman said it too. All right. So he's checking out the ladies, and she says very, very calmly and very happily at first, she says, look out, you'll break your neck. And then he just kind of laughs and scoffs it off. And she says on line 5 there, she says, she's not so pretty anyway. Anyway, not pretty enough to take a chance breaking your neck looking at her. Now here I think she is giving him a subtle clue. And I would say, guys, you kind of have to listen to these clues because she's being nice at first. But about my wife, I say that she is a stamp collector. And what I mean is, she's fine. She has a page, and it has little squares for stamps. And there once one thing happens, and she's fine, no problem. But she's collecting stamps the whole time. When it gets to the end and that page is full, I'm doomed, right? Boom, yeah. And that's not bad. I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just the way she is, and I think it's an admirable trait because she controls her emotions very well, and she doesn't, get mad at every single little thing. Not that I am a bad person, but we're all human, right? And so I think that when she is making this gesture towards him, watch out, you'll break your neck. That's his cue to think, oh, I really did look at that woman a little too much. I need to be better, right? But he doesn't, does he? He continues with it. And she says, I think this is kind of a shyster move. He says, he tries to explain it away. Oh, well, that one, it was just the complexion of that one. It's a complexion you don't see in New York. Come on, give me a break. Tell me another one. And then she says some things. She says, when I have breakfast with you, it makes me feel good all day. So that's another kind of little hint, little subtle thing where she says, I am satiated by you all day just from a simple breakfast. Do you think there's some undertones there of her saying, Why do you need to seek more and look for more? Why do you need to look outside when I can have just a simple breakfast and feel great all day? And then she says, you're getting fat. So she's trying to put him in his place a little bit. Oh, but you're getting to be middle aged and you're fat. You're getting fat. And she says, I love it, but keep in your place. And then she says, let's not see anybody all day. And I highlighted the word see because he is looking, isn't he? Looking, looking, looking. And she says, let's not see anyone all day long. Let's just hang around with each other, you and me. We're always up to our neck in people, drinking their scotch or they're drinking our scotch. We only see each other in bed. And he's like, the great meeting place. So just always kind of rebounds and falls back to sex. The great meeting place, he says. And it's even in uppercase letters. The great, like it's a divine thing. He says, stay in bed long enough, and everybody you ever knew will show up there. I mean, that's kind of a jerk thing to say, right? So she says, I'm talking serious. This wise guy, I'm talking serious. She says, I want him, her husband says, I want to go out with my husband all day long. I want him to talk only to me and listen only to me. Now that is like, she started off with a little, hey, don't break your neck. And then that's more like shooting a flare into the air to me, saying, you need to start paying more attention to me and not looking at these other women. And I think I would just charge men with not being good enough at picking up on those clues, on those little things. Because like I said, there's the stamps. I mean, it's not everybody, I know, but there's the stamps. And you got to know when that thing's getting, okay, right? And that's just all goes into kind of growing and learning in your relationships with people. But and I think we can talk about at this moment right here, what is the difference between the way men do it and the way women do it? Did I tell you guys about men are from Mars, women are from Venus? I think I did, right? Yeah. So that guy Gray, he says that men are Mr. Fix It. They always want to fix it. Like, well, here's the solution to it, and it's very, very logically didactic. And women want to feel, right? Well, I can kind of see a little bit of that here because she's saying, I want you, this is what I want you to listen to me, and I want you to look at me. And he says something like, if we go to bed, everybody will show up there eventually. What are you saying? she's like really throwing you a bone here, and you're not picking up on it. All right. And then they have these friends. I don't know. This is kind of a side note, but they have the Stevensons. And I don't know if you guys are married or have boyfriends and girlfriends or whatever, but a lot of times you'll have friends and they can kind of become toxic a little bit. There are other couples that are your friends and they're always wanting to do this and that, and they can become toxic. I had some that were just that want us to go out to Leander all the time and be at their house. And finally we were just like, well, we gotta stay home more. But they're usually their friends, the Stevensons, take them to the country, which is a whole other thing. It'll come back in the end. All right, now we're on Fifth Avenue. And Fifth Avenue is like the swankiest place you can imagine. It's the place. I went into a Fifth Avenue shop one time. I was with my wife, and we were just looking at a watch. It was a jewelry shop. There were watches there. And just out of curiosity, I said, well, what is the most expensive watch you have right here? And she pointed to one, and she said, well, that one's $40,000. $40,000 for a watch? I mean, it tells time, right? Like that's wow. So Fifth Avenue. And I remember this very well. You would see so many different types of people. She says this. She says, okay, I know what I'll do. We're going to have a day together. and we're going to go to the football game, and we're going to go see the Giants. Because why? Because there's not going to be a bunch of women there. So you can just look at the men bashing each other's brains out, and you'll be happy, and you'll look at me instead of all these other women. And then we're going to go to a to the movie theater, and you're going to watch the movie. All right. So these are all things to try to keep him engaged with her and the experience with her, rather than seeking more outside of their marriage. And as she's saying that, she says, "Say, are you listening to me?" Because apparently during that moment, he had done his thing again. You know, I mean, the only thing I have to say is I think men look at women, women look at men. I think it's a normal thing. But don't be a jerk and like turn around and look at her butt as she goes. You know what I mean? That's just lascivious, right? And especially if you're with your woman and she sees you doing that, you're just being a jerk doing that, really. I mean, at least look at somebody as they're passing and just for a second or something, but don't like follow them, right? Um, okay, but that being said, when you get married, here's the thing. Something like 200 million years of evolution has brought us to this place. And that evolution includes the thing that makes it all work is this attraction to others, right? That's what creates new babies. That's what makes the civilization roll on. So that attraction to, maybe it's the opposite sex, maybe it's the same sex, whatever, but that attraction is what it's probably the strongest feeling you'll ever feel in your life. Isn't that true? I have single friends. I have several male single friends, and like one of them told me, he says, "Colin, I wake up every day, and pretty much my whole day is occupied with the horrible fact that I'm alone in life." Like, oh man, that is just hard, right? My other friend is a childhood friend. This one, it's kind of the same. It is the primal instinct, isn't it? Not just the attraction, but sex, all of that sexual attraction. It is inside of us. You can't get around it. It's just there. Now, I would love to say that when you get married, it ends. But does it? Heavens no. Heavens, I mean, it's the strongest thing that's inside of you. And then you get married and it doesn't end. It continues. And so you have to figure out a way to, if you're going to be monogamous, then you have to figure out a way to restrain those feelings, or repress those feelings, or do something so as those feelings don't ruin your marriage and rule your life. You know what I mean? I think I told you guys that my grandmother divorced. He wasn't my grandfather, but her husband, when she was in her 80s, like 84 years old, because he was making eyes at another woman in church. I mean, when that happened, I thought, so you're telling me that this thing we feel never stops? And you'll ask old people, they'd be like, no, no, never stops. Do you know that the place where the place where STDs are just raging the most are in old folks' homes? It never stops. You don't ever like not feel attracted to others. And so there you go. But if you want to be in a happy, loving relationship, then you got to figure out a way to mitigate it, right? Okay. She says, and then they go on, and he's talking about one of the girls that he just looked at. Says she was a hatless girl with dark hair, cut dancer style like a helmet, who was walking past him with the self-conscious strength and grace dancers have. She was walking without a coat, and she looked very solid and strong, and her belly was flat, like a boy's under her skirt. And her hips swung boldly because she was a dancer and also because she knew Michael was looking at her. She smiled a little to herself and she went past, and Michael noticed all of these things before he looked back at his wife. I mean, I want to say two things. I have seen this in Manhattan. There's no doubt. You see the models. and you know they're models because they're 8 feet tall and beautiful and thin as a rail, and they're in Starbucks buying those those salads that are there. They're like lettuce. I don't know what they are, but you can tell they're together. They're you can tell, and then you could go over there by Broadway. You can see the actors that are walking around. It's very interesting. But that's just because I'm a writer and I like to study people, people's mannerisms and characteristics, not just women. For example, I write a lot about the men who stand in the shadows and go when you walk by, they go smoke, smoke, smoke. I must have it written on my face or something. I used to have long hair, I guess that's why. But people try to sell me drugs everywhere. Every country I've ever been to, people try to sell me drugs. I can't even get off the airplane in like Barbados and Jamaica without someone. Hey, ganja man, ganja. Anyway, okay, so she finally just comes out. The page is full. She says, "You always look at other women. Every damned woman in New York City." He says, "Oh, come on, only the pretty ones." Well, this dude is a jerk, I think. I mean, at long last, the dude's just kind of a jerk. And I'll go on and say it. You know, when you're young, I say your late 20s and stuff. A lot of times you don't have the relationship experience to not come out and say these things just out in the plain day like that. And then she says, "Oh," he says, "but how many beautiful women are there in New York anyway? 17." And she says, "More." She says, "Everywhere, every damn place we go, restaurants, subways, theaters, lectures, concerts." So apparently the guy has a problem with it, right? I mean, like I said, it's human nature to notice other people. It is. But it's not human nature to be a jerk and make your mate feel badly because you're doing it. Right? Yeah, I agree. So I mean that takes it to another level. It's the game. It's the game. People have called it the game. And like he says here in a minute, he says that I was going to get to it, but he says that they're pretending to shop, these women. And that makes me this interesting. What do you mean they're pretending to shop? Well, isn't it true that it is a game people play? People get all dressed up and go out and hope that other people will look at them. I mean, you're going to have to find somebody somewhere, right? Isn't that true? You're going to have to find somebody somewhere. You can't really, because of all the laws and whatnot, you can't really, workplace relationships, right? You don't want to really kind of get into that. So you got to find somebody somewhere. So you got to go out and find somebody. Where's it going to be? In a bar? Yeah, that's a great idea. You're drunk, you meet somebody, you think, "Oh, she's hot. I'd love to have sex with her." You go home, you have your one night stand, and then the next thing you're married with children. That is a great reason to marry somebody. Why did you marry? "Oh, we met in a bar. Seemed like the right thing to do at the time." you know. Well, then where do you meet them? If not a bar, well, okay. I don't know. Connect, you get set up by your friends, maybe, like a double date or something. That's usually pretty good. That usually works okay. A lot of people meet online these days, which I think is fine. But if not that, you're going to meet them somewhere, grocery store. And it is the thing that people do. They get dressed up and they go to the grocery store, they go to Target, they go downtown and all that, and they want people to look at them, don't they? And that's just life, right? And so I think what he's doing is he's playing that game to where she'll walk by and he'll let her know that he's looking at her by his mannerisms, right? And hey, maybe not saying anything, but saying it with his eyes and with his movements. And his poor wife sees all that and she feels awful because of it, right? Yep. And then here's his ignorant excuse. He says, now, darling, I look at everything. God gave me eyes, and I look at women and men and subway excavations and moving pictures and the little flowers in the field. I casually inspect the universe. She says, You ought to see the look in your eye when you casually expect the universe on Fifth Avenue. And then he says, I'm a happily married man. But now this is when it really gets interesting for me, is because she says, do you mean it? Do you really mean it? Do you really mean you're happily married? And he says, yes. And this is the central question of the story to me, is that we already established that when you become married, you don't just suddenly stop desiring or stop being attracted to others. But how happily married can you be if you are constantly searching like this, right? And so there is some kind of a sliding scale, a an area. It's not the right way is never this or that. It's always the middle way, and always very nuanced, right? So it's not that when you get married you'll never desire anyone else, but it's not also that when you get married you're just going to continue looking. But it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think there's a healthy area somewhere in the middle, right? How do men and women think about marriage in that way? Do they think differently? Ladies, y'all are going to have to help me out with this. Do women, when they get married, do they expect their man to just never desire anyone else? And do they feel more inclined just to be happy with one man? It's even hard. It's even hard just watching TV with your wife or husband, because it's filled with beautiful people. Okay, here comes Scarlett Johansson, right? What are you going to do? You just kind of don't say anything, I mean, even even she'll say, "Oh, she's the most beautiful woman on the planet" or something. What do you say then? No, my dear. No, my dear. Only you. You know, probably not. You say, "Yeah, she's gorgeous, right?" But you have to be careful there too. Like, I can tell you this: my wife is in love with Aquaman. It's true. Who's that guy? He's
Jason Momoa.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, she every time he comes on, she's like, "Oh my god, he's of course all the things I'm not." So that feels kind of makes my gut feel kind of weird, But I have to be big enough to encourage that, right? I say, yeah, I can see you. I can see how he's a handsome fellow, and I'll say, yeah, man, he must work out, you know. But you have to be well. I mean, if you're gonna dish it out, you got to be able to take it too. But it is hard sometimes just commenting on actresses and things like that. Oh yeah, do you think she's pretty? Yeah, sure. But you have to be careful. She is a pretty woman, you know. But one thing I tell my daughter-in-law is like you kind of have to, especially her image of herself. You have to be careful because whatever her name is, Gal Gadot, is that her name? Okay, she is like the top one half of the top 1% most beautiful people on the planet. They search the entire world to find her, and all the rest of them. Scarlett Johansson, I keep saying that name, but just what comes to mind. Um, who's that? Megan Fox, these kind of people. They are the top. You can't compare yourselves to them. I tell my daughter this. Say, don't try because that is not real. And anyway, so to me, real beauty is like is more honest than that. But anyway, that's a different story. So here we go. Do men and women? I think the princess movies screwed us up, because in the end of the princess movies, they live happily ever after, and it kind of gives this tone that there is a moment when you'll find your mate, and then after that, it'll just be all good. But I'm here to tell you, man, marriage relationships are hard, tough, really tough, because you're fighting all of these things, all of these internal urges. You're fighting, and I've said this before. I think, you know whatever your religious views are, stick with that. But in my view, you ought to cohabitate before you get married. Why? Because my Lord, you're gonna have to wake up next to this person for the next, hopefully, ever. Right? I've been doing it 20 years now, and you got to know, right? You got to know. Another thing that I always say to people who are thinking about getting married is more. It's not really about physical attraction. It's not. It is not. You want to be attracted to the person for sure, yeah. But it's not like, oh, she's so hot, I'm going to be happy with her forever. No, careful, easy. It's more about, do you have the same song to sing in life? That's the most important thing of all. And a lot of times people don't talk about these things before they get married, right? Well, what kind of life did you want to have? Well, what I would like to do is just sell off everything we have and buy a sailboat and just live. I want to be sailing towards the horizon with $5 in my pocket and a dream. Maybe that's not her idea of a good time. Maybe she wants a house and a family and all that. These are things you should talk about beforehand. All right, so going on with this, any other thoughts about anything, marriage or anything? Okay. So moving on. They've been married 5 years, and he says they sit down. Let's don't fight. She says she doesn't want to fight. She's like trying to bring it back. Um, and then you can get a little bit of a gender theme here, where she's talking about football, and it's as if Shaw thinks that women don't know anything about football. She says when they tackle each other, they make divots. It's very exciting. Well, let me tell you something. My wife knows 10 times more about football than I'll ever dream of knowing. So that's kind of a gender fallacy for sure. For me, anyway, it is for me. Um, he says, I have not touched another woman. Now, this brings up this whole thing that we have. It's called emotional cheating. Is there such thing? Emotional cheating. Emotional cheating. What if you met somebody and you share, you never touch, say you never touch one time, but you share confidences. You might even tell that other person, I really love you. Is that cheating? I'm going to say the same thing. It might even be more hurtful in a sense, because I don't know. I think maybe men and women think of sex in a little bit different ways at times. The cliche, anyways, that men think of sex like scratching an itch. It's not a big deal. Oh, no big deal, you know. And women might gravitate more towards the emotional connection of it. But if you are doing this, what they call emotional cheating, in fact, I have a cousin, a really close cousin, who's a marriage counselor, and I darn near asked her to come be like a mediator of this class today. But emotional cheating. So if you subscribe to the idea that sex is just physical, then that happened. It's in the past. You can let it go. I'm glad you got to scratch that itch. Now, doggone it, you come back and you be better from now on, right? But emotional cheating, that's different, isn't it? That's like, oh, you love her. You're in love with her, right? Yeah. Well, that's a whole other story, isn't it? So, ladies, should you forgive your man if he cheats? Guys, should you forgive your lady if she cheats? Is it an ironclad end to a relationship? Should it be? Be all about forgiveness. I would hope that people could work past something like that. Oftentimes you can't, right? Oftentimes you can't, but I would hope that there could be some understanding if it's not going to persist, and if it's not going to be like very emotionally, it's not a very emotional attached type of thing, not a love kind of thing, but more like a sex kind of thing. I hope that you could work past it, especially if you have children and you value your marriage and all that. The reason I ask that is because in our society, a lot of times it's popularized on TV and everywhere else that, as soon as there's infidelity, that's it. You got 5 minutes to get out of this house or whatever. And I would just hope that we would be more understanding, because people struggle, right? Life is a terrible, desperate battle against incredible odds every day. And a lot of times you're struggling against your own desires, and we're not all perfect. We're not all perfect, and sometimes a marriage or a relationship is valuable enough to fight for, right? Swingers. But I do know that it does work for some people, like Hannah says. I don't know, and I want to highlight the idea that, look, I've been married 20 years, monogamous relationship, all that, but I do want to highlight the idea that adultery is not illegal unless you're in the military, right? It's not illegal. It's just immoral, and in some people's view. And so, if that works for you, I don't know. I mean, these days, you guys, things are so different. When I growing up in the 90s, I was a teenager in the 90s, which was great in so many ways, but it was very conservative when it comes to sex, because we were just coming off of the 80s, which were the big decade of AIDS, and everybody was very worried about AIDS and pregnancy, and we didn't have the morning after pill and things like that. So it was a more conservative time. Now things are I think things are different. I'm not young now, but I think things are different now, and things are changing in a lot of ways. We have all different genders and different things that we value. And so if something like that works in your relationship, then I'm all for it. I think, I'm not sure what polyamory is. I think it's just like an open marriage, I guess. If that works for you, that's great. But you're gonna have to somehow divorce your emotions from that jealousy that we all feel, right? And that would be very difficult, I think, very difficult. Okay, moving on. So I wanted to say a thing about alcohol. Um, when you, this is totally off this, not really part of this thing, but when you get married and you get successful and all that, a lot of times the alcohol starts. And that's when every night you're going to want to have a bottle of wine. You're going to want to have a scotch like they do. Whew. Be careful. Be careful. You can become an alcoholic before you even know it. It can just sneak up on you like that. And I always tell my students, if you want to stay moderately safe in life, just drink beer and alcohol. I mean, you're not going to, can you get a DWI? Of course. Can you wreck your car and kill people? Of course. But the likelihood of you being like, just the depths of drunkenness on alcohol, on wine and beer is less than when you start drinking scotch, Long Island iced teas. You fill in the blank, right? So be careful about that. I think this story is about young adulthood and the trials and tribulations, and alcohol is definitely one of them. Definitely. So be careful. Okay, now you go on. We're gonna do. This is interesting to me on the bottom of 1039. He says, "If I pass them on the street and I don't look at them, I'm fooling you." Great. I'm fooling myself too. So he's trying to say, if I am honest, if I'm good to you and don't look, then I'm being dishonest to myself. He seems very self-absorbed, doesn't he? Very, very selfish. She says earlier, she says, I haven't even looked at another man. And I just want to say, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I just want to say that I think that it is a marriage and relationships seem as if, from a female standpoint, they are more monogamous, more reserved to one person, whereas a lot of men just feel like this is just the one I'm with and keep looking. And I don't know if that's right or not, but it seems like relationships and marriage are a more serious institution for females than they are for men. Am I right or wrong about that, do you think? Men have more of a tendency to just kind of blow it off. Yeah, so I have a good friend, actually, female friend, good friend, and things come up, we talk, and she's saying that she could never have a one night stand. Like, to her, she could never just have sex, not like scratching an itch. It's in no way, shape, or form could she ever do that. It has to be in conjunction with the deep emotional connection that she had. And I think that's interesting. I think that's good. It's wondrously good. But I think I would know more men who would say it would be easy to have a one night stand. No problem. It's just like scratching an itch. Right. So I don't know. And I think also let's look at the marriage, the institution of marriage. What was it originally? To consolidate wealth among powerful families. And also, it was to protect women because if you think about it, women didn't have any rights. And I mean, like almost none. I mean, the women, even up until, just before the Victorian era in England, couldn't own property, couldn't hold office, certainly couldn't vote, these kind of things. And because of that, men had all of the power, right? Up until, probably early early 1800s in England anyway, the first son got all of the inheritance. So the second sons were screwed, but the first son got all of the inheritance. And then where does that leave the girls, the young women? They have to get married. So that's their primary drive in life, is to find a proper mate, to find a good mate, to marry as high as she can. A lot of times it would be arranged by the family, again, to consolidate wealth, to consolidate power. But so for the longest time, because men had the jobs, had the wealth, had the money, had the power to vote, had the freedom to move, all these things, the one institution women could rely on to protect them was marriage. And so a good bit of that has lasted, I think. A good bit of that has bled over. And I think now that's not the case. I mean, women and men are what I think of as darn near, I mean, they are certainly equal, but the glass ceiling is got a bunch of dents in it, at least. I mean, we have a female vice president. We're doing well. We're doing better. I should say we're doing better. But still, it happened to my sister. She was with this guy for 10, 15 years. She was in the Czech Republic, and then they went to the country of Georgia, and he was this ambassador and all that, and he never married her. And the whole time, she was there supporting him the whole time for, I think it was 10 years, a decade. And he saved up something like $200,000 during that time. And then when they decided to split, she had no claim to any of it because they had never married. So it's still a function of protecting each party, can be male or female in this. But anyway, so I think marriage has been more of a important thing for women than it has for men. And maybe that has continued on into our modern day thinking. Out of that idea, that's ridiculous. Certainly a man. Yeah. So anyway, you're right. And so they took, and for the longest time, love wasn't a part of marriage, right? You look at the great Jane Austen novels. It's all about getting married, right? Mr. Darcy, right? It's all about marrying the right guy, right? But love is a relatively new phenomenon in marriage. It was always for protection before. Now you have love involved in it, and that's great. Because what else? I don't really know any other reason. Okay, so we're going to go on. I like to be free, she says. What does she say? Oh, she says, you should outgrow that feeling. It's a kid's feeling. Now, I would have to kind of side with him a little bit in that case because it's hard. I'm not sure you outgrow physical attraction, but what you can do is you can control it. That's what you need to do. Okay, moving on. He feels like he says, there's actresses. I'm on page 1040. She says, I like the girls on 44th Street at lunchtime. Boy, he's really a connoisseur, isn't he? Like he can tell you. I like the girls on 44th Street at lunchtime. Actresses, all dressed up on nothing a week, talking to good-looking boys, wearing themselves out, being young and vivacious outside Sardi's, waiting for producers to look at them. I like the sales girls in Macy's, paying attention to you first because you're a man. I haven't had that experience. Leaving lady customers waiting, flirting with you over socks and books and phonograph needles. I got all this stuff accumulated in me because I've been thinking about it for 10 years. And now you've asked me for it, and here it is. Well, so she says, all right, go on. He says, I like I think of all the girls, the Jewish girls, the Italian girls, the Irish, Polak, Chinese, German, Negro, Spanish, Russian girls, all on parade in the city. I don't know whether it's something special with me or with every man in the city who walks around with the same feeling inside him, but I feel as though I'm at a picnic in this city. Now, dude, you're going to have to go to some classes on how to talk to your lady because that is no way to. I feel like I'm at a picnic in this city. This is no way to make this argument better. Well, I just feel like I'm at a picnic and, I'm going to just dabble in this and that and that and this. No way. Come on. Okay. And then I want to caution, like, this is on page 1041, and I have a little note in my book here. She says, "You say you love me." And I think that it's really, really scary in this regard, because can you love two people at once? I think you can. I think you can. I mean, what law is there in the universe that says when you fall in love, you can only be in love with one person? Now, you might say, if you were really in love with this person, you would not have had the feelings for that other person to begin with. But I don't know. I think it's wondrously complex. Yeah? Wondrously complex. And so I would hate to just narrow it down to, well, if you love me, then you'll never look at any other woman again. I just don't think that that's realistic. You don't have to be a jerk. Okay. And now he goes on and he says, she says, sometimes I think you'd like to be free. And this kind of cuts me to the bone because, oh, you guys, every relationship you've had, every marriage, at some point or another, you think of it. You're like, what if I was just single again? You think of it, right? Sometimes I think you'd like to be free, she says. And then she says, anytime you say. He says, yeah, sometimes I think I might like to be. And she says, anytime you say. And then he says, don't be foolish. He's trying to tell her, I think that this is a classic case of people they're talking, but they're not actually communicating, because I think he's saying, yes, I would like, sometimes I think of that, but I don't want to because I'm with you and this is what we have. And I want to preserve our marriage. And then she says, anytime you want, And then she says to him, someday you're going to make a move. And he goes, I don't know. Come on. She says, no, someday you will. And then he agrees. He says, yeah. Basically, he says, yeah, I know. Yes. And so that's it for me right there. That's it. He's admitting to her that one day this urge that he feels is going to get the best of him, and he's going to bring it from just looking to physicality. And so to me, if he's admitting that, then that's kind of like the death knell. But I think for him, like you're saying, I agree. I think for him, like for me, I might walk out and I might see a nice looking woman, and I'm definitely not going to follow her or something. But like in my mind, I go, oh no, that was a nice looking woman. That might happen once. It's a urge that is beyond an urge. Maybe it's a proclivity. It's something that he's going to follow through on, right? So just like everything else, it's very complex and it comes with a sliding scale, I wrote some questions in my book here. And then she says, well, let's go to the country then. Maybe the country is better. Let's go to the country today. So it's like he wants to have his cake and eat it too. Straight up says to him, stop talking about other women. Stop talking about pretty women. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it at all. And I think I give her great props because she says to him, and I kind of skipped over it, but she says, when you do that, it makes me feel terrible. She says, and ladies, guys, everybody, I think that you should communicate your feelings in this clarity. When you do that, it makes me feel terrible. When you do that, I feel a horrible feeling, a rotten feeling in the pit of my stomach. When they pass and you look, it's like you want them instead of me. So I think you'd be clear because, people sometimes don't get the messages. Does she want to dominate him? Is she trying to dominate him? Is she trying to be overly domineering and that you must only think of me? You must only. I'll agree that it can happen where a woman can try to just keep her man under her thumb just to the where, where were you? What were you doing? Who were you talking to? I mean, it can happen. I don't necessarily think it's the case right here because, like we've covered, he's a jerk. Like he's really out to check out women and makes no attempt to hide it. Do you think, is there a double standard with this? I mean, if a man cheats versus a woman cheats, is there a double standard with that? I mean, historically, certainly. Historically, say Henry VIII, or say, this king, this ruler has had 50 mistresses. What did people think? Oh, well, it's normal for, he's a powerful man, all that. But if this queen had 50, then what? Well, during the times, it would not be accepted. Think about Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. She was put to death for even the rumor of it, right? In this day and age, if a well, let's see, I assume it's this day and age. Anyway, when I was growing up, it would be he's got he's got 5 girlfriends. He slept with 10 women or whatever. It's like, what is he? He's a player. This girl has 5 boyfriends and slept with what is she? Right? So there is this double standard that goes on here, and I think we need to be careful about that, right? Because I don't think I mean, just asking me, people are people. You do whatever you want, and I don't think sex it's not a bad thing. It's a normal thing, If you're single, as long as you are safe, it's a normal thing. But whenever you're in a relationship, it's a different thing, right? It's a different thing. And then and so that's it. So we need to worry. There's a kind of a double standard, is that the man did it. Oh, that's just him. That's just boys being boys. But the woman did it. It's like, ooh, right. And we need to break our minds from that double standard. Also, I would just say that whenever you're 45 years old and you decide to get married, make sure that you know these things, because you're walking into it. And forever is a mighty long time, people. It's a mighty long time, right? And you ought to try it for a while. I think you ought to be in a relationship for maybe 5 years or something before you try to get married to the person, because then at least you ought to try it for a while, right? Odor of chrysanthemums. Now you're also thinking of being home every night, right? You're not going to go to the bar every night and leave me home, or like that, because there's other competing interests. It's not just sex and other people, right? You're not going to be playing pool with the boys 3 nights out of the week, are you? You're gonna be. And you should even talk about stuff like, you don't expect me to cook for you every night, do you? I mean, let's get that out in the open, right? I have this most amazing marriage, you guys. It's like it's more than I could have ever hoped for, to be honest. My wife, she's so perfect. She's, you know, I've been married 20 years, and I desperately love her. Do I see people? Of course, I'm a human being, but I know that she's the one for me, and she is just the best wife. She I never ever expected her to do all the things that she does, and she does them because she wants to. And that is like, I don't know, it's just really, it's a magical thing, my marriage. It's really good. But we talk about this stuff all the time, like all the time, and so, but I do that thing where a beautiful actress or whatever, I'll comment on her, she'll comment on her, but I do worry. I hope it's not hurting her. You know what I mean? That's why Aquaman, you talk about Aquaman anytime you want, you know? So anyway, I'm no perfect person, and I'm no authority on marriage or relationships, except the fact that I've done it for quite a long time. And I just know, like Brisa said, you start doing stuff like this, hey baby, like that's not something that is going to be conducive to a long-term marriage, right? And even in the end, him admitting it. And what I said by did she allow herself to become a victim is not during the course of the story, but maybe later on. Is she accepting the fact that, oh yeah, I guess he's going to cheat, and I'll just be one of those wives that kind of just look the other way and pretend it's not happening and smile and wave kind of thing. And that would be, in my mind, allowing herself to become a victim. Because at this point, I almost think that she should have said, well, I mean, if monogamy is what she is after in a marriage, and fidelity, then I think at this point she says, okay, so you're looking at these women, you say you will eventually make a move on one of them, so you're going to cheat. So then I really don't see a whole lot of future in this marriage, you know? I mean, if he's just coming right out and admitting it, he doesn't even seem to have any desire to even accept the fact that maybe it's wrong, or even just talk about it, or even squelch it or dampen it even a little bit, or even hide the fact that he feels it. He's just right out in the open. So to me, this is going nowhere, this marriage, you know, and the sooner the better. Before you have kids, certainly. Before you have kids, you need to get all that worked out before you have kids, all of it. Because you need to be there for them.